part of the For Frequency's Sake podcast network. This is Card Subject to Change. On today's episode, we're initiating a new Booger Eater into the world of wrestling, Network Kingpin Doug Green. This is our Booger Eater's Guide to Wrestling, and what a start. We sat Doug down, Clockwork Orange style, and made him watch the most recent episode of Smackdown and the 1992 Royal Rumble. Now we get to hear his opinions as he enters our world.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast by the fan for the fan. We're talking about the Card Subject to Change podcast. With me, as always, we have below me, Stripes.
What's up, everybody?
Here. To this side, we have the Wizard, CZ.
Yo, what up, everybody?
Myself, I am the Honorable One, Nick Bull. I'm glad you're joining us. And tonight we're doing something a little different. This is, of course, a wrestling show, and we're going to keep it wrestling-based, but we're going to do something a little different. We're delving into Booger Eating 101, the guide to professional wrestling, and we thought, what better way to do this than to bring somebody on who doesn't, I'm not going to say doesn't know anything about wrestling, but doesn't really know much about what's going on with the current product and stuff. So our guest this week, episode 56, the Booger Eater's Guide to Wrestling, Volume 1, we have For Frequency's Sake Network, co-founder and quote-unquote wise man, the one, the only Doug Green. Doug, thank you for joining the Card Subject Change podcast. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on, guys. I'm excited to talk about all of this. It's going to be I think it's going to be a fun night.
I agree. I'm excited to hear your opinions on everything. Like we said in the intro, we taped your eyes open, made you watch 92 Rumble, recent episode of Smackdown. Let's get to know you first a little bit, Doug. Talk about your background, what you know of wrestling, and your first impressions of what we had you watch.
Sure. So I'm not completely foreign to the professional wrestling world. Watched a little bit of it in the late 90s, early 2000s. So I was watching a lot during the Stone Cold Rock kind of days. So that's kind of when I was watching then. That was on like Monday nights. I think it was Monday Night Raw. I would watch that and then as the lead into Monday Night Football. So that was I would kind of roll from one to the other. So not completely unfamiliar with the product. In there, obviously, back in the 80s when I was growing up, Hulkamania was the big thing. Every kid on the playground was trying to rip open their T-shirt type stuff, So it was, definitely something that I'm familiar with. Not as familiar with the stuff today as I was from the stuff back in the day.
So, Doug, you talked about the Attitude Era, what we refer to as the Attitude Era, Stone Cold and The Rock, and that's one of the golden times of wrestling. Just some background for you. Wrestling has been chasing that momentum ever since they lost it back in the late 90s, early 2000s. It's been hard to replicate. And the current product we had you watch, an episode of Smackdown, the storyline on there has been cited as the best thing going since those Attitude Era days. So it's kind of unique that you knew about Stone Cold, you knew about Rock. That's the golden era of wrestling for the modern time, the Attitude Era. And now having you watch something current like we did with a recent episode of Smackdown, and we'll get to that episode of Smackdown later, and then the 92 Rumble. I can't wait to hear what you pick apart these shows or the questions that you have, because for someone who has limited background on these, I love we just thought this would be a great idea to get the perspective of someone who is not familiar with this and get their genuine thoughts on it.
Yeah, it was definitely kind of an experience to see these. Just kind of watching kind of how things go and how the similarities and the differences between the matches. They all of them kind of seemed, at least on the 92 version of the Royal Rumble, very much was, I don't want to use the word scripted. I don't know how you guys feel about those types of things. But there was definitely an ebb and flow of, Team A would take the lead, and then Team B would kind of come back, and then there's definitely kind of they wanted to make sure that both sides kind of got their moment in the sun before there was a final conclusion to it. So that was the thing that I picked up on, was making sure that everybody kind of got their moment, and then they got the big resolution at the end. Sometimes that was a twist, and sometimes that was expected, but that was at least kind of the way that I kind of seen the storytelling of this.
Absolutely. And yeah, go ahead, CZ. You're good.
No, you're fine.
And then that's kind of what they're gearing base towards is your storytelling aspect of the matches. Now, the one thing that I like to do is go back and forth and watch last old stuff and then watch the new stuff, because you can see the kind of contrast. I don't know if you saw it, Doug, but there's definitely the contrast between the newer stuff and the older stuff. The older stuff is kind of a simpler time. They didn't have to do as much to get the crowd motivated. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I mean, you saw the crowd was absolutely crazy in 1992 at the Knickerbocker Arena.
Yeah. Everybody was hyped right from the get-go. The thing, obviously, coming into it, the graphics, the production design, those types of things. Now everybody's got, somebody comes in the ring, they've got their Twitter handle underneath there. There was a guy that was, I don't remember what his name was, from Smackdown, but he was talking about how he was 25 years old, he was a TikTok star, and now he's the American champion or something. I don't remember what his name was, but that was
Austin Theory. Yep.
But compare that against somebody like a Ric Flair. A 25-year-old Ric Flair nowadays would be very much in that kind of same vein of self-promoting, and so those through lines are there. Just the avenues they're taking nowadays are very different.
And I'm glad you mentioned Austin Theory, because I have this on the 1992 Rumble on as we speak, and I think an Austin Theory nowadays would kind of be like maybe a Roddy Piper of the 92. I mean, right now it's Roddy Piper against the Mountie, but yeah, the Mountie.
So
yeah, there's some laughable things with the 92 Rumble. We had you watch it because it's undoubtedly probably one of the most stacked Rumbles with the star power in it. And then it was a very big deal for Ric Flair to show up, being a part of the other company, the competition, and for him to show up and win the title in the way that he did was kind of, one of the biggest moments in pro wrestling history. So with that star-studded cast of characters in that match and the underlying matches of it, I love, Doug, how you brought up the storytelling and how each team made sure they looked good in the presentation of the story. And that, I love that you pick up on that as a quote unquote outsider. And it's storytelling. And so many times as pro wrestling fans, not just you, I'm talking about CZ, Stripes, myself, we get wrapped up in the wins and the losses. And the bottom line is, I look at the person that when I watch wrestling, you talk about production and stuff, and I do. I'm a big production nut. I love that stuff. But I watch the guy that loses. And sometimes losing is winning. And I think if wrestling fans can get that better, I like to see how guys lose and how they come back from that loss, because it's all a decision in the back. Let's face that, right? We all know it's a decision in the back, and the story and the decisions played out in the ring. So I think so many times we get caught up in the decision, the winner. Whereas I like to look at the guy, gal, team, whoever lost, and see what that means for them and where that means for them next. That's what I dig out of it.
And the biggest part of wrestling for me, is the entertainment value. You talk about, the winner is determined in the back by whoever's running the show, but it's not just about the story they're telling, it's about how they tell it that really brings, I don't want to speak for the two of you, but for me as a fan, that's what really brings me in, is not just the story, but how it's being told. And the 92 Rumble, there's a big story unfolding here, like you said, Nick, with Ric Flair coming in from the outside and winning the championship in the way that he does. Doug, I wanna just let you know, I know you and I had a couple conversations earlier in the week while you were watching the 92 Rumble. I don't want you to hold back. I want you to talk about some of the stuff you said to me
You're not gonna
off
hurt
the air.
here.
No feelings are hurt.
All right. I wasn't quite sure with you guys. Some people are very much like, no, this is real, because that was the kind of generation that I grew up in. There was the no, it's real, and you see the people getting whacked with chairs, and you're like, really. But like watching 92, you can clearly see, somebody goes to punch his face, he's punching his hand next to his face. They're stomping next to their head. They're not stomping on their head.
Right.
That I picked up on, quite a bit, just because, I was kind of looking for, I wanted to see that versus today, how much closer are they getting to when they're actually making those types of moves? How much better is I don't want to use the word acting, but how much better is kind of they're getting close to that? Deed's chiming in already. All right, okay. But yeah, that was the thing for me was how much overacting and how much characterization it was. There was nobody spoke in a normal tone of voice. Everybody was screaming. Everybody was yelling. I told both CZ and Deej, I'm like, there was a lot of cocaine going on in that building. Everybody's eyes are like big. It's like, they were. It's so much intensity. I'm just like, man, just chill. I get that's the persona, but it's just like so much. I couldn't imagine somebody like a Steph Curry or a Aaron Judge or a Dak Prescott nowadays just coming out and just their eyes that big and be like, we're gonna win the Super Bowl tonight. It's just so crazy versus kind of mainstream sports of kind of the way they take those characterizations and how far up they feel they need to pump that to keep those kind of characters and to build kind of that energy.
And that's definitely part of the times for wrestling as a whole in the late 80s, the early 90s. You have those extreme characters who do have the bug eyes. They're yelling at you, "What you gonna do, brother?" It's meant to be over the top because that's what drew fans in at the time. Now you look at today. What were your initial reactions to watching SmackDown from Friday?
Yeah, a little bit more subdued in terms of just the whatever. A lot of kind of. I come back to if you guys have seen Friends, do you remember the episode where Joey talks about his acting methods and the smelling the fart, where you take the breath and kind of like let things hang in the air?
Yeah,
there's a lot of that going on, especially during the Roman Reigns kind of 1,000th day celebration thing. The confrontation with his two members of his former crew or two members of his crew. He'd say something and then he would like let it hang in the air for 15 seconds and then complete his thought. And then it would then the crowd would yell. There'd be like another 30-second break and then the other guys would respond. And it was just kind of like, much more kind of drawn out in terms of those things. The intensity was still there, but they tend to let things kind of build on their own as opposed to the inflection in the voice and the high energy kind of wording of it, verbiage.
And we talked about earlier.
Big thing. And the other thing I noticed from the modern stuff too, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good.
Was the thing that I thought was weird was they kept cutting commercial in the middle of the match. And I'm like, when did they start this? I'm like, why in the hell are they not doing this between matches? Especially a lot of times, there was a couple of times where they did show it coming back what happened during the commercial break, but there was a couple of times where they didn't. And I'm like, why not? That was something that was a little confusing to me as a newcomer as to why you're not showing the entire product.
And I can speak to part of that is those commercial breaks, depending on the type of match that's going on, are kind of a rest period a lot of times for the wrestlers. They take it a little slower because they get signals when the commercials are on. Yep. The other thing, this was not part of SmackDown, but the other company, AEW, which we'll have you watch at some point, they like to do their breaks. Stay tuned. We'll be in picture. And
they go picture in picture.
I absolutely despise that.
I know what you mean, Doug. You're like, oh, I bet I missed something. And I had that feeling too. I know what you mean. But I guess I hate to speak for Stripes or CZ here, but me personally, when a commercial break comes on, I tune out. That's time for me to get up and go grab something. Or when the picture in picture's on, I at least know to keep an eye on that and I don't have to listen. But I get what you're saying there, Doug, about how you feel like you are missing something. And you do. You really do. To count on what CZ said, you look at the refs nowadays, they got the earpiece in. They're getting the instructions from the truck about time cues and whatnot. So letting those guys, okay, we're back on TV now type of deal. So I liked how you mentioned, Doug, how you noticed the delivery and how things breathe. That's kind of been the success and the calling card of this Bloodline saga is whoever's speaking, whoever's been thrown into the spotlight along with Roman has really embraced it, and no one's really flubbed. Like, this thing has just been effortless and seamless, and I'm glad that you mentioned you noticed the pacing and how they wait for reactions. And yeah, a lot less cocaine today, probably minimal cocaine.
Steroids are still up there,
but still, you can still, there's still yellers. There's still yellers. There's still yellers today. Don't get me wrong, but a much different delivery style than what you were probably seeing with the 1992 Rumble.
And I wonder if some of that has to do with there was the women were a very big storyline on Friday night. Obviously, there was almost none in '92, but the women very much the made of money or the money the briefcase thing. That was a big deal, and the women's matches were
Money in the Bank.
We're being pumped up to be as the equal level of the men, which was another thing. That was interesting. Seeing that versus no women back in '92. But I wonder if some of that was, helping with kind of the calmness of it. They talked a lot of smack, but there wasn't a lot of screaming about it. It was just, I'm going to beat your ass, not I'm going to beat your ass.
Well, and you had mentioned that you had watched the Attitude Era. Some had called this era now, they call it the reality era. So it's a little more kind of reality, I guess. I mean, because people are big fans of reality TV. They don't like the over the top gimmicks. I mean, you'll have every once in a while over the top characters, or we call them gimmicks, but not to where you see it back in 1992, like the Bushwhackers, Australians from but it's pretty much the reality era.
I forgot Jim Hacksaw Duggan's had even existed until I saw him show up with the board.
Okay, Stripes, you pulled the Band-Aid off. You mentioned the Bushwhackers. He is. Stripes, you mentioned the Bushwhackers. I don't want to go through the Rumble match by match, elimination by elimination, but Doug, I want your opinion. The Bushwhackers, the guys from New Zealand who came out with the arms flailing, licking each other's face. Tell me what you thought about give me your impression of that particular match.
licking the kids in the crowd, may I mention?
Yeah. I definitely I saw them lick the kids in the crowd. I thought, oh God, that is not fly today.
They loved it.
Yeah. I'm sure back in
obviously
92,
pre-COVID, right?
Clearly
Yeah.
pre-COVID. Yeah, I would want to be in the room when the meeting was held today that somebody said, we're going to do Bushwhackers 2.0 and we're going to let kids in the crowd. I would want to see the look on the executive faces at Fox when that.
Let me ask you
Now-
this: if I were to tell you that the Bushwhackers used to be before '92 the most brutal tag team you could ever imagine, would you believe me?
Probably, yeah. Because
Okay.
a lot of times with kind of these characters, from what I kind of remember, they sometimes when they would transition characters, they would switch kind of personality. So it does not surprise me to hear that they used to be real intense and real kind of brutal, and then kind of switch to not comedy, but
Cartoony.
cartoon.
The word you're looking for is
Yep.
cartoony.
Cartoony, yeah, to be kind of more kind of the other end of the spectrum. Does not surprise me at all.
At some point, we will have you watch a sheep herders match. That is pre-Bushwhacker Bushwhackers. And you're going to be blown away by the differences between the
Hey,
teams.
they weren't licking people's faces.
No. Nope.
They
One
weren't
thing
licking
I want to
kids'
zero. One thing I want to zero in on with you, Doug. Did you pay much attention to the commentary teams, both in '92 and in modern times?
Yes, I did. Very much 92, I felt they were there. And it may be because it was a pay-per-view, but I felt they were there, very much there to drive the narrative of the storyline of the night and to get you hyped for the big match at the end. Now, again, maybe it's a difference between a pay-per-view and just a regular Friday night. I don't know.
No.
But the SmackDown crew that I saw this week, much more reserved, more, I'll call it more kind of regular sports analyst, but obviously with the traditional pro wrestling flair of clearly the analyst is rooting for a particular team, and what they do is great, and what the other team does that is the exact same thing is terrible. It's still that, but it felt a little bit more. It felt a little bit more modern, as opposed to the guy I was talking about in '92, Gorilla, I think his name was. Trying to, he how much money he had bet on Ric Flair to win, and he needed to get up and he needed to leave and all that kind of stuff.
That was the late great Bobby Heenan. And before you go any further, I want to tell you, you were blessed with, in my opinion, one of the greatest commentary teams in wrestling history with Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan. Bobby the Brain Heenan is the very best manager to ever be in wrestling. I don't care if Nick and Stripes agree with me. That is fact. 100% factual. And when he gets on the mic, he is just golden at anything he does. And this was no different. You're right. He is the heel commentator. So he is rooting for the bad guy, which is Ric Flair. Mm-hmm. He has a heated investment with Ric Flair, and yeah, he was all throughout the show. He's driving the storyline. One of my favorite lines in pro wrestling. You probably heard it at least 10 times watching the '92 Rumble.
Know any better.
Go ahead, Nick.
It's not fair to Flair.
Yes, it's not fair.
It's not fair.
It's not fair to Flair.
Yeah, I did catch that. I didn't realize that was a. I didn't realize that was a catchphrase, but I did hear that a few times.
Oh,
especially during that last match. Yeah, well, that's not fair.
Bobby Heenan. Bobby Heenan. You would have thought he was in the stirrups, giving birth during the call of the Royal Rumble match. Like every time somebody new came out, oh, he's so much bigger than Rick. Oh, Bobby Heenan to me wins the best dramatic performance with his call. It's one of his all time. He is just nilly for Flair. When I went back and watched it, I just sat and listened to him and laughed. Just listen to all the different stuff he drops in there. I don't know if you noticed, Doug, Roddy Piper dropped a Wet Dream reference in a promo earlier in the show to where Mean Gene cut him off immediately. But
I missed that.
Bobby the Brain Heenan is the absolute Bobby the Brain Heenan is the absolute GOAT manager of all time. He's also the GOAT heel commentator of all time. There's none better. He can pick apart a bad guy or a good guy for all the stupid stuff. The bad guy does the same, and it's great. I mean, Heenan is he's the measuring stick. That's who everybody should strive to be like. Doug, what was your favorite thing from the 1992 show? Where you were like, man, I like this, or something that made you laugh, or something you really know.
Yeah, I remember there was a cartoon that I used to watch that was based upon WWF wrestling, and I remember Rowdy Roddy Piper being the heel version, maybe not the bad guy, but he was clearly the antagonist, even in that show. And I think everybody used that. So I kind of had an idea of kind of what his kind of MO was. So I kind of enjoyed watching his match. He was great. And then obviously the last match where everybody's in there, and I got to see kind of all these names from kind of my childhood, Hulk Hogan and Sergeant Slaughter. And even I'd forgotten that Undertaker was around in 92. He must have been really young at that point. That must have been early in his career, because he was still hanging around back in the late 90s when I was watching. So that was kind of I was kind of actually surprised to see Undertaker kind of roll out there. And then that was kind of the two highlights for me, was kind of seeing those names from my childhood that I remember seeing the other kids on the playground that had the shirts or all the action figures that we all had when we were kids, seeing all those guys running around there in the ring.
And I would have to agree with you on that, Doug. I mean, even the Royal Rumbles of nowadays, you get to see all those superstars or wrestlers, whatever you want to call them, that you normally don't get to see on a show-to-show basis, or possibly a week-to-week basis. And nowadays, the Royal Rumble is all about the surprises and who are they going to bring back from yesteryear. But back then it was like you said, it was everybody that was there, and it really wasn't surprise central. It was just everybody that they had on the roster, and here we go, let's do it.
Also, the 92 Rumble match itself, kind of a more unique time where you didn't see all those wrestlers together at one time. A lot less TV back then. I think they only did 4 pay-per-views a year. So seeing a card or a magnitude of all those guys at one show was such a big deal, because you wouldn't see them against each other in a match possibly ever again. So a lot of Hall of Fame names, a lot of legendary names. Of course, you have, Flair winning the WWF Championship for the first time, which was a big deal. Heenan just being the color commentary for the whole thing was great. I guess we talked about your favorite thing from the 92 Rumble, Doug. What would be your favorite thing of what you saw in the current product? On SmackDown, excuse me.
There was the match that I was interested in that I was interested in. There was, and I don't remember who they were. And I don't know, because I don't remember all the wrestlers' names.
Oh, that's cool.
There was a guy that came out. He was normally, again, it was the qualification for the Made of Money matches. And there was a guy that came out that was normally a tag team guy, but he was doing it solo. And I thought he was going to win that match, and then he ended up losing it.
That was Montez Ford? Would that be Montez Ford?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yep. I thought for sure he was going to win that, just kind of based upon,
right.
The commentary kind of usually kind of clues you in as kind of which way things will kind of go.
Yeah.
And I was kind of led to believe one thing and kind of got the rug pulled out of me a little bit on going the other way. So that was a little bit of a surprise without that. One I found to be a good match, because I couldn't kind of anticipate.
Right. And that's one of the good things about commentary, on like a fan's perspective. They can, like you said, they can drive that narrative, and they can kind of clue you in on, who they think is going to win, or maybe even, like you said, drag you on, lead you to believe that, hey, this guy's going to go all the way, and, like you said, drag that rug right out from underneath you. And those commentators do a good job both back then and now.
And as far as we know and what we've been told, most of these announcers don't know the result of what's going to happen because they don't want to know and or not told because they want the reaction to be legitimate and as real as possible. Yep. So
I can tell you that, Doug, this would be during your time of watching wrestling. Jim Ross, one of the greatest commentators of all time, he has gone on record as specifically saying, "Don't tell me the end. I want to be surprised."
I think they give them a very narrow rundown of what the show is going to be. Like, hey, you got this coming up, you got this spot. You know, I don't quote me, but that's kind of what I would assume they would do. Just because you can't go out there blind, you would almost have to have some sort of rundown, some sort of call sheet.
I would think you almost have to. They're obviously it's semi-scripted, but obviously you have to have, like you said, a little bit of an idea of when you can talk over. So because you don't want to start into a backstory of, here's when I wrestled this guy when they're about to do something big. You don't want to go into something elaborate like that. You have to kind of know your role with that stuff. Right. Know your role, as The Rock would say.
Yeah.
I got a feeling Doug says that to DJ quite a bit.
I
do. Know your role.
Doug, I want to. There was a specific reason that I wanted to do the '92 Rumble. Other than the history
the Beverly
of the
Brothers.
event itself. Yes, that's right, Stripes. The Beverly Brothers. No. We talked a little bit about promos, and at the end of the Rumble, you get what is arguably one of the top 5 greatest promos of all time. Ric Flair looking in the camera with a tear in my eye. Tell us what you thought about that.
That was pretty much when I texted you and said there's a lot of cocaine going on in this show. Yeah, that was intense. I kept waiting for the guy's blood vessels in his neck to pop. Like, I could not take my eyes off of his neck. Like, they were like, the veins in his neck and the muscles in his neck were all stuck out. I'm looking at that spray tan. I'm looking at those muscles and those veins. I'm like, this dude's head is literally going to pop off.
It's such a collection of characters in the time period. I mean, you're right. There's a lot of stuff going on in that locker room, and how it's changed since then is probably for the better, for sure. But yeah, that was one of the all-timers. I remember, go back and count, how many times does Bobby Heenan say yes after Flair wins the Rumble? 28 times in a row. Yes.
28 times?
Yes. 28 times. I mean, it's Heenan. I mean, I love his performance. Doug, I'm glad we had you watch this current SmackDown because you were watching the Money in the Bank qualifiers, and that's become quite the unique thing. I mean, it's been around for several years, but I don't know if you understand the premise, but man or woman wins that.
Yeah, because they kept making a big deal out of it. They kept saying it's life-changing, and I'm like, okay.
It is.
But they didn't. They never said how much it was. They never said if it's like a lifetime contract. They never kind of said what was around it.
Right. It's they have a men's match and a women's match. I think they're having 6 participants in each this year. Winner,
yes, correct.
Winner is the first person to go up and get possession of that briefcase, which is a title shot anytime, anywhere.
For any title.
Any title. So the element of surprise has always been there. They've kind of, when I say they, WWE has done about everything imaginable. So it comes to about this time of the year where the Money in the Bank comes out. They have up to a year to cash it in. But people are always trying to think of ways that it's been done or how they're going to cash it in and stuff. So it's cool that you got to see some qualifying matches for that. But yes, it guarantees you a contract, a match anytime, anywhere for the next year.
Yes. One of the participants, I wanted to ask about that. Young lady came out in the I thought she was supposed to be like Sergeant Slaughter's daughter or something. She was wearing kind of that same kind of hat. Was she supposed to be some kind of legacy character?
I hate
easy
that
to let you take this.
I hate that I'm about to say this sentence because I've gotten a lot of criticism in the past about it, but I'm glad you brought that up, Doug. So there has been a huge Twitter war going on between Sergeant Slaughter, his daughter, and that young lady whose name is Lacey Evans. Sergeant Slaughter is not happy that she has kind of thrust herself into his gimmick in the modern era. But you're right. It very much feels like this is Sergeant Slaughter's daughter. It's not. She is a is she a Marine? Former Marine?
Marine. Yeah.
Yeah, she's a veteran. Yep.
So there is a military background. The characterization is legit, but she's been getting a lot of heat from Sergeant Slaughter and his fans to the point where we could bring DJ on and he could tell you his disdain for Sergeant Slaughter right now because of it. I think I haven't been following it as closely as I could have, but I think Sergeant Slaughter is in a lot of hot water for what has been going on his end. Honestly.
Joshua, thank you for commenting in. Yep, she is a vet, so she does have the background. You're right, CZ. I don't know the specifics that has been said back and forth, but Sarge should know by now. You don't get in that argument. You're never going to win that argument, right? Just stay out of it.
Yep.
But yeah, she has been a vet. Now she's been repackaged, Doug, so many different times that it's kind of a running joke that when she does come back, the fans kind of roll their eyes like, "Oh, what is she going to be this time?" So
and how long will she be at this time?
And how long will she be this? Right. There's a little bit of that going on, and then on top of the Sergeant Slaughter thing, yeah. So she's kind of been in the news recently.
Gotcha.
Doug, what kind of questions do you have for us? What are some of the things that stand out that you're curious about that we could answer for you?
I think for me, I was kind of looking at turning. I guess for me, I know you guys are big into like the local wrestling kind of scene. I wanted to know kind of how you guys got into that. I'm sure you've talked about this on prior episodes, but I've kind of never heard that backstory. How did you guys kind of get into the local wrestling scene where you guys go off to kind of those smaller kind of independent places?
Who wants to start, gentlemen? We've all got stories.
I'll start because mine's probably the quickest. I used to work with CZ back in the day, back at Channel 6, and we worked overnights and found that we were pro wrestling fans, so we would hand back DVDs back and forth, and then SCW was doing shows then. I know AAW was doing shows in town as well. So that was kind of the time when I started getting into independent wrestling. Oh, you'd see a guy on TV, and then he'd be here a couple weeks later, at the show. So that's how I did it. Met a couple guys at work that liked pro wrestling and just went to the indies that way. Stripes has a better story than I do, though.
So the long short of my story is in 2002, I went to an on sale date of, I believe it was a Smackdown. I'm not 100% sure. But I was hanging out. I went there all by myself. And instead of going to graduation parties or anything like that, I went and sat down at the Mark of the Quad Cities and waited for tickets overnight. I was a loser. So then I met Steven Youngblood, Shane Hollister, all those guys, Joshua Bunker, known as Nightmare. Yes, a lot of SCW cats. That's when I had met Kobe Lopez, Tyler Black, Seth Rollins, whatever. I kind of knew since 2002. But as far as like independent wrestling goes, the first time we actually, I should say I got into it, was a company in Chicago called PCW, Powerhouse Championship Wrestling, I believe. I think that's what it was. But we had went up there and we had saw the Legion of Doom wrestle, and Mr. Perfect showed up just out of nowhere, just randomly showed up at the high school auditorium. And it was cool because nobody knew he was there. He was standing off in the shadows, and, it's cool to meet him. And, that was like not that long before he passed away. But I mean, there's a bunch more to my story. I'm not going to take up the time. This is Doug's time. This is not me. I'll let CZ go right ahead.
So my story, I've always been a fan of wrestling. Company here locally, MCW. Stripes was it Midwest Championship? Is that what MCW? Yep. Okay.
Yep.
Got contacted by them. They knew I had an interest in photography. Asked me to take pictures around the ring. Mm-hmm. A show or two later, after I took pictures for a very short period of time, they said, "Hey, do you got a suit? You want to do a ring announcing?" And I'll tell you, I'm very much an introvert, so I was hesitant at first, but when you put the suit on, you grab the microphone. Just like if you're a wrestler, things kind of change. I said sure. I got in the ring and I did intro work for probably 2 or 3 years between MCW, another company called WPPF, and eventually SCW Pro. I had a lot of fun. There were a lot of good times. That's where I met Stripes and his wife. Several of the wrestlers, a number that Stripes has already mentioned. Mm-hmm. Even before that, I also should say I did some reporting for a website based out of Chicago called Pro Wrestling Ponderings. So I also did interviews. First met Colby Lopez, a.k.a. Tyler Black, a.k.a. Seth Rollins. Had a couple interviews with him here in Donahue, Iowa. Some bigger independent names, Eric Cannon and Darren Corbin, who have been in and out of the Quad Cities for the last decade. I interviewed them in Chicago. But I've been all over the map as far as wrestling goes. My favorite time, though, has to be when I did commentary, and that's really my launching into the whole behind-the-scenes aspect. I miss it. I stepped away because I wanted to spend time with my daughter at the time. That was a little more important than spending every other Saturday night with a microphone in my hand. But yeah, that's how I got into it. That's my story.
Cool. Yeah, I didn't even know such a thing existed until you guys, started your podcast. And I started seeing the pictures from wherever you were from, and I'm like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah, it's such a cool thing because, I mean, if you're willing to drive, say if you just don't want to go to an SCW show, and their shows are great, but you can get some great stuff within 2-3 hours of here.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going up to LaSalle next weekend for a show, an hour, 20 minutes away. There's going to be some guys that are on TV there, national known people, so you get it's very much a subculture, just like anything else there would be, just like anything else, there's a following. I would say, though, that the community of wrestling fans is different. Like, everybody's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like 99% of the people are pretty cool, like low key. Everybody gets along pretty well. So that's the cool thing about wrestling shows. Everybody's there to have a good time. And for the most part, they do. And the community is great. That's what I love about it. Everybody's a fan. And we said
the cool thing about LaSalle. I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, you're good.
No. You go ahead.
The cool thing about LaSalle, you spoke about LaSalle. That was the first place I ever seen CM Punk. He was supposed to be there as a mystery, as a mystery guy. He was attacking some other members of the opposing group. I don't know what it was, but that was the first time I've seen CM Punk. I've heard things about him, but when I first seen him, I knew there was going to be something special with that guy. And that's the one thing about independent shows that you can go to, not only around here, but anywhere in the Midwest, around the United States. It's almost kind of like a breeding ground for tomorrow's stars. I really think so. Or even stars that come in and from yesteryear, not even yesteryear, but they got released from their contracts and they're coming down to,
it's like
hone their talent some more. Yeah.
It's like minor league baseball. You get the up and comers, and then the vets who are still around touring, or maybe who are out of the game but show up for, the pictures and autographs. they're part of it too. I've always likened pro wrestling. It's not a knock at pro wrestling. I've always likened it to the circus. The circus, the carnival, it travels all over the place. It's got something for everybody, right? I don't like
a variety
every type
show.
of wrestling. It is.
Well,
I don't
that's the funny
there
thing.
is.
Back in the day,
what's great about it.
wrestlers used to speak Carney. I don't know if
they were part of the carnival. They were part of the carnival.
There's an actual language called, Carney. So, and some pro wrestlers actually spoke it just to kind of keep their secrets of the wrestling business to themselves.
Right. It has its roots, but that's the way I've always looked at wrestling. It's got something for everybody. It's got a cast of characters. It's got all different types of wrestling, all different types of stories. You just pick the one you want to get invested in and stick with. I mean, that's the way I've always likened it. But yeah, maybe the next thing is we got to get Doug to a local show. We get Doug to an indie show maybe, and then
yes,
and then get to
I agree.
Talk about experiencing a live show and what that's like, because that's better. I mean, hey, I love watching all these big shows on TV and having friends over, but I go to wrestling shows. It's like going to concerts. You love to listen to music, but you want to go experience it, right? And that's what you get at wrestling shows. That's how I feel. That's how I like in wrestling shows, like to a concert. You want to go and see it and feel it as well. So,
and I can tell you, SCW Pro Summer Nights is Friday, June 23rd at the Bluegrass Community Center. So that might be a good opportunity, Doug, if you're free Friday the 23rd.
We'll have to
tell me more. Tell me more. Tell me more.
Tell me more.
Announced for the show, Shane Boucher and Malik Champion will be taking on Eric Esnight and is it Garot? I don't know how to
or Garot, something like that.
I believe it's Garot. Garot.
I think it's Garot too.
Hey, did you see Eric Esnight was on Smackdown the other night?
He was. That was pretty cool.
Holding back Stripes' boy, Baron Corbin.
Yeah.
That was on.
He was trying to take him back out to the dumpster.
No, but yeah, Doug, I think we will definitely love to have you come to a live show and break it down for us afterwards. Like you did with this stuff tonight. I mean, you brought some great points up and stuff. I don't know if you have any more questions for this somewhat assembled panel we have here of geniuses.
No.
Did you know? Did you know that the Genius? Did you know that Genius and Macho Man are brothers?
Yes.
I did not.
The Genius
know that.
who came out.
I might have known that back in the 90s, but I don't think I know that today.
Lanny Poffo.
The Brothers Beverly.
The Brothers Beverly. So, Doug, final impressions from you before we wrap things up. What are your thoughts both on the 92 Rumble and SmackDown to close things out?
Like I said, for me, the 92 one was a lot of nostalgia, seeing kind of the stuff that I remember seeing as a kid from back in the day. That was kind of the highlight of it for me. I was actually kind of impressed by the athleticism that you see today in today's matches. Back in the day, it was much more. The power was much more on display. To pick guys up. Those types of things. Where today, I feel like they do a lot more jumping, a lot more athleticism.
Mm-hmm.
They do.
And I don't know, like back in the day, somebody coming off the top rope was a big deal.
Yeah, it was.
Now here Friday night, I saw like two guys come off the top rope, and I'm like, I wonder if that's not as cool anymore because
it's more normalized.
Yeah.
And I mean, there are some things that we dislike. Like I personally am getting tired of seeing, I don't know. I don't remember exactly if there was a spot like this on Friday. I'm sure there probably was, where you see two or three guys standing outside the ring and someone's going to jump into their arms. That's become way too commonplace, in my opinion. When they first started doing it, it was jaw dropping. Now it's just okay. They're doing that again. What do you guys think of that? Am I in the minority there?
The tope. I think you're referencing the tope suicida, where they go head first through the ropes.
Right.
Yeah, it kind of gets tried. There is some stuff that gets done a lot. But
Canadian Destroyer.
Ah,
Nah,
everybody
don't
does
even
that.
bring that up. I'm out of here. I'm out of here if we're talking about that. No, I'm just kidding.
Doug, when you're
Um,
when we're off the air, I want you to go to YouTube and look up Canadian Destroyer. It is the most overused wrestling move today, in my opinion. It's an interesting move, cool when it first started, but everybody and their brother does it now.
and it's not cool when everybody and their brother does it. Like a guy like me should never be doing one of those, and there's guys like me doing those. I don't know. Regardless, that's like inside baseball, but you go look up Canadian Destroyer and you'll see what we're talking about. But I think I can sit here. I will speak for Wizard and Stripes here, Doug. You are welcome back here anytime.
Of course.
This was fun. I mean, having a new set of eyes to something somewhat familiar with, but not haven't been with recently was definitely something we thought would be a good idea. And thanks for being a good sport and playing along with us, Doug.
Yeah, no problem. It was fun. I know you guys have a good time. I was excited to come on. Can't wait to come back. I expect you to dominate. I expect you to be the number one on the iTunes charts. You guys better be bringing it every single week.
Yeah. Because what you gonna do, brother, when Card Subject to Change runs wild on you?
Sorry, couldn't resist.
Had to.
Well, that's going to wrap things up for us, Joe. Go ahead, Nick. You were going to say something.
We're going to close the book here on the Booger Eater's Guide to Wrestling, Volume 1. We're absolutely going to close it with that. We want to thank Doug Green, the wise man, co-founder of the For Frequency's Sake Network, for joining us tonight on tonight's show, episode 56. My goodness. Some big stuff coming up here. Stay tuned for events coming in the next few weeks. We're celebrating a birthday here in a few weeks, CZ and Stripes. So some big things coming up for that.
DJ is messing with us.
Messing with us right now. But the wise man, the wise counsel, Doug Green, thank you so much for coming up, being here with us tonight on the show. Stripes, CZ, you guys have anything closing you want to talk about?
I just want to talk a little bit about next week. We're going to be a day late. We're going to be broadcasting on Monday, but we have a great show lined up for you. We have Mean Mason Beck, SCW, and Midwest Wrestler coming on. That is going to be an amazing show. Looking forward to talking to y'all next week right here on Card Subject to Change.